Hey there, it's GreenSwanica.PROetess. This is my Christmas Carol reading series, and this will be video number 4, and I'm just using this visual marker for each video so I can just quickly look at my videos and upload them in the correct order when the time comes. So this is 4, plus it's for, subscribers and viewers as well. Okay, I'm going to start reading after I put down this. This is video 4. And I will continue. Here we go. Why, it's old Fezziwig. Bless his heart, it's Fezziwig, alive again. Old Fezziwig laid down his pen and looked up at the clock, which pointed to the hour of 7. Pardon my coughing. He rubbed his hands, adjusted his capacious waistcoat, laughed all over himself from his shoes to his organ of benevolence, and called out in a comfortable, oily, rich, fat, jovial voice, "Yo-ho there, Ebenezer, Dick." Scrooge's former self, now grown young man, came briskly in, accompanied by his fellow apprentice. "Dick Wilkins, to be sure," said Scrooge to the ghost. "Bless me, yes, there he is. He was very much attached to me, was Dick." Poor Dick. Dear, dear. "Yo-ho, my boy," said Fezziwig. "No more work tonight. Christmas Eve. Dick, Christmas, Ebenezer. Let's have the shutters up," cried old Fezziwig with a sharp clap of his hands, before a man could say Jack Robinson. You wouldn't believe how those two fellows went at it. They charged into the street with the shutters. 1, 2, 3 had 'em up in their places. 4, 5, 6 barred 'em and pinned 'em. 7, 8, 9 and came back before you could have got to 12, panting like racehorses. "Hilly-ho!" cried old Fezziwig, skipping down from the high desk with wonderful agility. "Clear way, my lads, and let's have lots of room here. Hilly-ho, Dick. Chirrup, Ebenezer. Clear way." There was nothing they wouldn't have cleared away, or wouldn't have cleared away with old Fezziwig looking on. It was done in a minute. Every movable was packed off, that is, as if it were dismissed from public life for everyone. The floor was swept and watered, the lamps were trimmed, fuel was heaped upon the fire, and the warehouse was as snug and warm and dry and bright a ballroom as you would desire to see upon a winter's night. In came a fiddler with a music book, and went up to the lofty desk and made an orchestra of it, and tuned like 50 stomach aches. In came Mrs. Fezziwig, one vast substantial smile. In came the three Miss Fezziwigs, beaming and lovable. In came the 6 young followers whose hearts they broke. In came all the young men and women employed in the business. In came the housemaid with her cousin, the baker. In came the cook with her brother's particular friend, the milkman. In came the boy from over the way, who was suspected of not having board enough from his master, trying to hide himself behind the girl from next door but one, who was proved to have her ears pulled by her mistress. In they all came, one after another, some shyly, some boldly, some gracefully, some awkwardly, some pushing, some pulling, and they all came, anyhow and everywhere. Everyhow, that is, sorry. Away they all went, 20 couple at once, hands half round, and back again the other way, down the middle and up again, round and round in various stages of affectionate grouping. Old top couple always turning up the wrong place, new top couple starting off again as soon as they got there, down the middle and up again, round in various stages of affectionate grouping. Old top couple always turning up in the wrong place. New top couple starting off again. Wait a minute, I'm looking at something. Here we go. Okay, I have to find my place, and I am finding it. Okay. When this result was brought about, old Fezziwig, clapping his hands to stop the dance, cried out, "Well done!" and the fiddler plunged his hot face into a pot of porter, especially provided for that purpose, but scorning rest upon his reappearance. He instantly began again, though there was no dancers yet, as if the other fiddler had been carried home exhausted on a shutter, and he wore a brand new man resolved to beat him out of sight or perish. There were more dances, and there were forfeits, and more dances, and there were cake, and there were, I'm not sure how to say this, negoos, although I'm not positive of that pronunciation. And there was a great piece of cold roast, and there was a great piece of cold boiled. And there were mince pies and plenty of beer, but the great effect of the evening came after the roast and boiled, when the fiddler, an artful dog mind, the sort of man who knew his business better than you or I could have told it to him, struck up Sir Roger de Coverley. Then old Fezziwig stood out to dance with Mrs. Fezziwig, top couple too, with a good stiff piece of work cut out for them. 3 or 4 and 20 piece of partners, 20 pair of partners. Sorry. People were not to be trifled with, people who would dance and had no notion of walking. But if they had been twice as many, 4 times, old Fezziwig would have been a match for them, and so would Mrs. Fezziwig. As to her, she was worthy to be his partner in every sense of the term. If that's not high praise, tell me higher and I'll use it. A positive light appeared to issue from Fezziwig's calves. They shone in every part of the dance like moons. You couldn't have predicted at any given time what would have become of them next. And when old Fezziwig and Mrs. Fezziwig had gone through all the dance, advance and retire, both hands to your partner, bow and curtsy, corkscrew, thread the needle, and back again to your place, Fezziwig cut so deftly that he appeared to wink with his legs and came about his feet again without a stagger. When the clock struck 11, his domestic ball broke up. Mr. and Mrs. Fezziwig took their stations, one on either side of the door, and shaking hands with every person individually as he or she went out, wished him or her a Merry Christmas. When everybody had retired but the 2 apprentices, they did the same to them, and thus the cheerful voices died away, and the lads were left to their beds, which were under a counter in the back shop. During the whole of this time, Scrooge had acted like a man out of his wits. His heart and soul were in the scene with his former self. He corroborated everything, remembered everything, enjoyed everything, and underwent the strangest agitation. It was not until now, when the bright facts of his former self and Dick returned from them, that he remembered the ghost and became conscious that it was looking upon him, while the light upon its head burnt very clear. A small matter, said the ghost, to make these silly folks so full of gratitude. Small! Echoed Scrooge. The spirits signed to him to listen to these 2 apprentices, who were pouring out their hearts in praise of Fezziwig. And when he had done so, said, Why, is it not? He has spent but a few pounds of your mortal money, 3 or 4 perhaps. Is that so much that he deserves this praise? It isn't that, said Scrooge, heated by the remark, and speaking unconsciously like his former, not his latter self. It isn't that, spirit. He has the power to render us happy or unhappy, to make our service light or burdensome, a pleasure or a toil. Say that his power lies in words and looks, and things so slight and insignificant that it is impossible to add and count 'em up. What then? The happiness he gives is quite as great as if it cost a fortune. He felt the spirit's glance and stopped. What is the matter? Asked the ghost. Nothing particular, said Scrooge. Something, I think, the ghost insisted. No, said Scrooge. No, I should like to be able to say a word or 2 to my clerk just now, that's all. His former self turned down the lamps as he gave utterance to the wish, and Scrooge and the ghost again stood side by side in the open air. My time goes short, observed the spirit. Quick. This was not addressed to Scrooge. Wait a minute. Just wait a minute. I have to adjust my pillows behind me and everything. Scooch up a little bit. Okay, now let me find where I was. Okay. This was not addressed to Scrooge, or to anyone whom he could see, but it produced an immediate effect, for again Scrooge was himself. He was older now, a man in the prime of life. His face had not the harsh and rigid lines of later years, but had begun to wear the signs of care and avarice. There was an eager, greedy, restless motion in the eye, which showed the passion that had taken root, where the shadow of the growing tree would fall. He was not alone, but sat by the side of a fair young girl in a mourning dress, and whose eyes were tears, which sparkled in the light that shone out of the ghost of Christmas past. It matters little, she said softly, to you very little. Another idol has displaced me, and if it can cheer and comfort you in time to come, as I would have tried to do, I have no just cause to grieve. What idol has displaced you? He rejoined. A golden one. This is the even-handed dealing of the world, he said. There is nothing on which it is so hard as poverty, and there is nothing It professes to condemn with such severity as the pursuit of wealth. You fear the world too much, she answered gently. All your other hopes have merged into the hope of being beyond the chance of its sordid reproach. I have seen your nobler aspirations fall off one by one until the master passion, gain, engrosses you. Have I not? What then? He retorted. Even if I have grown so much wiser, what then? I am not changed toward you. She shook her head. Am I? Our contract is an old one. It was made when we were both poor and content to be so, until in good season we could improve your worldly fortune by our patient industry. You are changed. When it was made, you were another man. I was a boy, he said impatiently. Your own feeling tells you that you are not what you were, she returned. I am that which promised happiness when we were one in heart, is fraught with misery now that we are two. How often and how keenly I have thought of this, I will not say. It is enough that I have thought of it, and can release you. Have I ever sought release? In words, no, never. And what then? In a changed nature, in an altered spirit, in another atmosphere of life, another hope at its great end, and everything that made my love of any worth or value in your sight. If this had never been between us, said the girl, looking mildly but with steadiness upon him, tell me, would you seek me out and try to win me now? Ah, no. He seemed to yield to the justice of this supposition, in spite of himself, but he said with a struggle, You think not. I would gladly think otherwise if I could, she answered. Heaven knows, when I have learned a truth like this, I know how strong and irresistible it must be. But you were free today, tomorrow, yesterday. Can ever I believe that you would choose a dowerless girl? You, who in your very confidence with her, weigh everything by gain, or choosing her, if for a moment you were false enough to your one guiding principle to do so. Do I not know that your repentance and regret would surely follow? I do, and I release you, with a full heart, for the love of him you once were. He was about to speak, but with her head turned from him, she resumed. You may. The memory of what is past makes me hope you will have no pain in this. A very, very brief time, and you will dismiss the recollection of it gladly, as if in an unprofitable dream from which it happened well that you awoke. May you be happy in the life that you have chosen. She left him, and they parted. Spirit, said Scrooge, show me no more. Conduct me home. Why do you delight to torture me? One shadow more, exclaimed the ghost. No more, cried Scrooge. No more. I don't wish to see it. Show me no more. But the relentless ghost pinioned him in both arms and forced him to observe what happened next. They were in another scene and place, a room not very large or handsome, but full of comfort. Near to the winter fire sat a beautiful young girl, so that last that Scrooge believed it was the same, until he saw her, now a comely matron, sitting opposite her daughter. The noise in the room was perfectly tumultuous, for there were more children there than Scrooge in his agitated state of mind could count, and unlike the celebrated herd in the poem, they were not 40 children conducting themselves like one, but every child was conducting himself like 40. The consequences were uproarious beyond belief, but no one seemed to care. On the contrary, the mother and daughter laughed heartily and enjoyed it very much, and the latter, soon beginning to mingle in the sports, got pillaged by the young brigands most ruthlessly. What would I have not given you to be one of them, though I never could have been so rude? No, I wouldn't for the wealth of all the world have crushed that braided hair and torn it down, and for the precious little shoe I wouldn't have plucked it off. God bless my soul to save my life. As to measuring her waist in sport, as they did, bold young brood, I couldn't have done it. I should have expected my arm to have grown round it for a punishment, and never come straight again. And yet I should have clearly liked to own, to have touched her lips, to have questioned her that she might have opened them, to have looked upon the lashes of her downcast eyes, and never raised a blush, to have let loose waves of hair, an inch of which would be a keepsake beyond price. In short, I should have liked, I do confess, to have had the lightest license of a child, and yet to have been man enough to know its value. But now a knocking at the door was heard, and such a rush immediately ensued that she was laughing. Face and plundered dress was borne towards it, the center of a flushed and boisterous group, just in time to greet the father, who came home, attended by a man laden with Christmas toys and presents. Then the shouting and the struggling and the onslaught that was made on the defenseless porter, the scaling him with chairs for ladders to dive into his pockets, despoil him of brown paper parcels, hold on tight by pockets, by his cravat, hug him around his neck, pommel his back, and kick his legs in irrepressible affection. The shouts of wonder and delight with which the development of every package was received. The terrible announcement that the baby had been taken in the act of putting a doll's frying pan into its mouth, it was more than suspected of having swallowed a fictitious turkey glued on a wooden platter. The immense relief of finding this a false alarm, the joy and gratitude and ecstasy, they are all indescribable alike. It is enough that by degrees the children and their emotions got out of the parlor, and by one stair at a time, up to the top of the house, where they went to bed and so subsided. And now Scrooge looked on more attentively than ever, when the master of the house, having his daughter leaning fondly on him, sat down with her and her mother at his own fireside, and when he thought that such another creature, quite as graceful and as full of promise, might have called him father, and been a springtime in the haggard winter of his life, his sight grew very dim indeed. "Belle," said the husband, turning to his wife with a smile, "I saw an old friend of yours this afternoon." "Who was it? Guess." "How can I, Tut? Don't I know?" she added in the same breath, laughing as he laughed. "Mr. Scrooge." Mr. Scrooge it was. I passed his office window, and as it was not shut up, he had a candle inside. I could scarcely help seeing him. "His partner lies upon the point of death, I hear." And there he sat alone, quite alone in the world, I do believe. "Spirit," said Scrooge in a broken voice, "remove me from this place." "I told you there were shadows of the things that have been," said the ghost, "that they are what they are. Do not blame me." "Remove me!" Scrooge exclaimed. "I cannot bear it." He turned upon the ghost, and seeing that it looked upon him with a face in which, in some strange way, there were fragments of all the faces that had shown him, wrestled with it. "Leave me! Take me back! Haunt me no longer!" In a struggle, if that can be called a struggle, in which the ghost was no visible resistance on its own part, was undisturbed by any effort of its adversary. Scrooge observed that its light was burning high and bright, and dimly connecting that with its influence over him. He seized the extinguisher cap, and by a sudden action pressed it down upon its head. The spirit dropped beneath it, so that the extinguisher covered its whole form. But though Scrooge pressed it down with all his force, he could not hide the light, which streamed from under it in an unbroken flood upon the ground. He was conscious of being exhausted and overcome by, and here's an illustration, and I'm getting ready to turn the page, an irresistible drowsiness, and further, of being in his own bedroom. He gave the cap a parting squeeze, at which his hand relaxed, and had barely time to reel to bed before he sank into a heavy sleep. And I might add that the excellent George C. Scott version of A Christmas Carol, that part of the movie, watch for yourself to see. Those of us that have watched it over the decades, absolutely, we know it and we love it. And the part where the extinguisher cap happens is the part where the ghost of Christmas Past says, "Truth lives. Truth lives." And that's a very powerful part of the movie. Okay, so this will be continued in the next video. Until then, I'm GreenSwanica yours, because poetry, and prose in this case, blooms